It's just like you and I naturally talking
I
anyway
know.
about therapy.
Double Dutch, like.
Yeah, that's how I like it. Good afternoon, evening, morning, whatever time of the day it is for you. Welcome to Couch Time with Kayla. I'm excited because this is the first Couch Time episode I've done with someone that's not family, like biological family. You know, you family to
I was
me.
about to say it. Change
My sister in Delta forever. But yes, this is the series just trying to get people interested in therapy to understand it. So it's my series on what is therapy like. And you are episode 1, which is what to expect in therapy, you know, because everybody has different beliefs about what therapy is. So, you know, I would love to talk with you because we talk about this stuff all the time, just in general, and going through that process. Yes. So I'm happy that you felt vulnerable and comfortable enough to come on here and just openly, as a Black woman, say, I have been in therapy and like help other people. I think it's really dope. Okay.
Thank you for having me. I'm an
Yeah.
open book. I'm ready. Let's
Okay.
do
Well,
it.
first things first, let's let the people know who you are. I've already thrown a little shout out that you are my sorority sister, but you are also my line sister. So do you want to give them your information, your name, where you're from, a quirky fact about you, what you do, all of that?
Oh Lord. All right. Well, my name is Chrisshelda Green. I go by Chris or Chrissy.
Mhm.
I live in the Illinois, Chicagoland area. Me and Kayla met in Iowa when we were still in college. So at this, wow, it's been a long time now. We can really say some years on there now.
Almost 8.
Man, I work in the banking industry. Now I'm in talent management, so I help to develop and train new hires essentially into like our company, and then I also work on projects as it relates to different like talent management type of projects or different rollouts that we might have with the company. Let's see, my background is in higher education as well as human development and family studies.
Mhm.
And I am a middle child, um, younger sister, older brother. Let's see, fun fact.
I feel like you have a lot.
I
You have,
don't know. What's interesting? I don't feel like I do too much. But let's see. In the span of like a little less than like 2 years, I've lived in 4 different states. So I did a lot of
wow.
moving. Yeah. So within that time, it was like Illinois, Iowa, Florida, and Louisiana.
Mhm.
So I used to do a lot of moving. This is probably the longest I've been in one spot since I was like 18.
Oh wow, look at that. Well, that I think that is a fun fact. I don't think a lot of people can say that in their life. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, I finally allow myself to get, comfortable to make a space feel like home for once because I'm used to living out of boxes and
look, I'm gonna have to call you back for another episode because you talk about something I'm interested in anyway. Well, thank you for introducing yourself, Chrissy. So let's just jump in. So, what has your experience with therapy been like, just in general?
so I definitely was one of those people who at least early on, not that I was like anti by any stretch of the imagination. I was like aware of therapy. And then especially as like it kind of is more talked about. I kind of got into more like podcasts and I watched a lot of like YouTube videos, like the people I would follow. So like it would be mentioned just in general. And so I think early on I kind of had this idea that people go when they have something to solve. So like something catalyzes it. And then the conversation kind of shifted and changed where it's like everyone could probably use therapy and it doesn't take a crisis necessarily to do it. And so after hearing some of that, knowing some experiences that I had that kind of still had like a hold on me in certain instances, I decided to seek therapy. It just so happened that the process was a little bit easier to do because actually someone who I started at the job with, we were in the same training class. Her mom has her own business, and she's a therapist, and she has, a few therapists under her. And so she was like, if you're interested, like, I can let my mom know. Like, at this point, she's a soror as well, her mom. So I was like, okay, there's these different connections. Like, I'm super tight, with this girl who I'm working with. Her mom's a soror, and I connect with her, and just regular conversation with her had been really awesome. And so I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. Like, let's do it. Let's see. Obviously, her mom isn't the one who saw me, but she kind of like did the introductions and kind of figured out someone who would work with my schedule, and then we just kind of went from there. And I was with her a year and some change.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's how I kind of like started, I guess, with therapy.
Okay, so it was introduced to you by someone and then it started there. So like what did you expect like before, because like you see a lot with therapy on TV, and this is the junk that makes me the most upset is somebody's always sleeping with their client, and I'm like that just gives us a bad rep. And so, or the therapist is a dull old person that often isn't a person of color in general, and that's usually the picture people have of a therapist. Maybe they're rocking a cardigan or something.
I
So
think my expectations were a tad different. I definitely know the stereotypes. I definitely know the drama written around, like in shows and media, around like what that relationship sometimes looks like between therapist and client. But for me, I definitely specified that I wanted to work with a Black woman. And luckily her firm has Black women therapists, so I knew off rip at least one connection would be there, or hopefully, and we were able to kind of like start at that baseline, if you will. And then as far as like my expectations though, I think I was worried about like mental breakdowns, or like basically somebody reading me for filth. Like for lack of a better way to put it. But like I guess what I would see is that someone would see way past like what I'm presenting to them, and then kind of like putting me on blast in a way, maybe in a nurturing way, but putting me on blast in a way where I felt naked. I felt stripped of like my armor or whatever. And so I was really nervous about that. Like, I think, I don't know. I won't say that doesn't happen or that it can't happen, but I have had that kind of experience before. But going into it, yeah, I was definitely like, so what you want to talk about? Like, what are we doing here? I'm like, playing with my thumb. Like,
today.
So like, is there like, a list of questions you want me to answer? Like, I'm an open book, but I don't know where to start here. Like, and then on top of that, I didn't come coming from like a crisis or a type of situation that would catalyze some type of conversation necessarily. Like, I was starting from a kind of like medium, regular kind of like space. And so, yeah, that kind of added to some of that, because I was like, whew, what do you talk about? what do you want me to do here?
Right. So even just not even knowing like how to even start a session, because you're right, most therapists, we're not gonna just open up and say, tell me about all this. I mean, at an intake, but otherwise it's self-guided quite
Absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely, yeah. I was like, I don't know where we go from here, sis. Like, I don't know how you wanna run this show.
Which is funny because I'm on the opposite as a therapist. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna just tell you everything you need to know. I'll figure it out. And I don't think either is like the best, response, but I can feel that piece though about what you said is you don't want basically like to be vulnerable enough where somebody like sees underneath everything that you've been working so hard to like maybe keep stable or consistent.
Right, absolutely. I definitely think that was part of my part of my Achilles heel, I guess, is that I've gotten really good. I'm self-aware, so that's why it's kind of like easy for me to talk about. But I'm very self-aware that I am really good at prepping myself for like worst case scenarios. I'm really good at prepping myself with responses, especially for things that might be triggering. So that way, when I have to talk about them, that emotional response has already been snuffed down enough or controlled enough where I can talk about it from like an objective level and not have to like dive in that, you know, iceberg deep level of, you're not about to see me cry, ma'am. You're not about to have me in here, you know, snotty nosed and crazy looking because I wasn't prepared for, you know. I think that was kind of my issue, was like, oh man, like what if I didn't think this through, or you know, she asked me something about this situation that I'm not necessarily prepared to answer or address, and like where do I go from there, what do I do from there. But there was also this piece of me that kind of hoped she did, because I know I do that, and I know that it's a defense mechanism. Like I'm aware that that's the case, and I wanted to kind of get past that, or to be able to healthily actually heal through, you know, traumas and things. So it was kind of like this weird like tug and pull with myself of how am I prepared to prepared enough to talk about it, and like, you know, be able to answer the questions and like feel and allow myself to basically feel, you know, the effects of it, of whatever I'm talking about, but also hoping that, you know, she does push my envelope a little bit. She does kind of pull me out of some of that, or, you know, help me reframe or reshape how I naturally kind of operate when it comes to those vulnerable topics.
And I'm so happy you said that, because like those two parts, like we like to think when someone goes into therapy, they're expecting just this opening and this break opening and like everything is okay, you learn about everything. But the truth is, like, a lot of people have those two parts, like a part of them that really wants to heal and like uncover everything, but then there's other pieces that are like, nah, I've been kind of dealing with this like all by myself this whole time. You're not gonna come in here and just unravel all of that, because I don't know what's gonna happen. So I'm curious about, oh, go ahead.
I think we had a conversation about that a little bit at some point, where it's just like the armor, whatever that is, whatever that external protective shield that you kind of put on, so that way you can like kind of get through life, day-to-day life or whatever, you know, over time practicing that and doing that, it can get thicker or tougher or whatever. And then you kind of become ingrained or enmeshed almost with that type of exterior, because it's worked, because it's gotten you through, you know, so much. And then now, as an adult with a different type of lens, knowing that like even one day, you know, wanting to have a family or, you know, things like that, and knowing that there are things that I react to or that I do that I wouldn't want to put, itty bitty babies through, you know, and have them carry through, because I wasn't prepared or better prepared for some of those more emotionally intelligent, I guess, type of like conversations. But I definitely think like you wear the armor and then you become like protective of said armor, and then it becomes I do it because it works now. Right. Like it hasn't failed me. It's protected me from the vulnerability and from like being disappointed and, you know, feeling hurt or right. being hurt.
And especially when that's connected to what it means to be a strong Black woman. You know, what happens if I don't wear this armor? Am I still strong, or am I now weak and vulnerable to harm and all of that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So thinking about that, which is all valid, and I'm certain a lot of Black people specifically might experience that, because we're used to wearing armor, because you got to guard yourself everywhere you go. How did you feel going into therapy, knowing that your therapist wants to take off maybe that shield, or wants to know the Chrissy underneath that armor?
I felt a little guarded. Like I said, kind of bringing it back again is that I am pretty self-aware, and so I know the types of people and personalities who tend to be able to bring some of that out of me just in regular everyday conversation, or like there are some people in this world, whether therapists or not, who are really good at navigating people with tougher barriers, or like just reading people in general. And by reading, I mean like understanding and, you know, empathetic, or, you know, are able to have these like conversations without necessarily like pushing buttons, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And so when I was on the couch, first and foremost, yes, there's a couch. There's likely going to always be a couch. I had two couches to choose from, and I was like, do you want me to sit on this? Like, do I lay? Like, whatever.
Right.
For the
Got
longest,
my feet up.
I would sit on one side of the couch on one cushion closest to like the armchair, and there was a pillow. I always had to have the pillow on me, like I'm holding. I think it was like
More armor.
it was more armor. I was like,
Right. But you had just
I'm like, you know, I couldn't
expect to
just.
have a spot in therapy. There you go.
Yep. So I would do that. So like that's physically how I showed up. And
Mhm.
then talking to her, you know, you talked a little bit about doing like an intake process. So the first, like, I guess couple sessions were fairly easy because it's kind of establishing like a baseline. You're probably doing some type of assessments,
Right.
like, you know, let's figure out where you're at. Is there anything that we need to be concerned about right now? Just similar, you know, like if you're going to like a doctor's office, a regular medical doctor's office, and you're trying to figure out, you know, if there's anything in the background that I need to be hyper vigilant of. And so that very beginning process made it a little easier because it was kind of prescribed. Like I knew it was going to happen. You know, there's kind of like steps to it, which I kind of appreciate, as a type A person as well. But I think sitting with her, I was definitely guarded. I'm sorry, I'm looking down because I'm just like thinking back, but I was
Oh,
definitely
sorry.
guarded. Um, she would ask me questions, and depending on how she like phrased it or her tonality, like I knew whether or not I was going to like word vomit, or, you know,
Mhm.
just answer it straight up, answer the question like straight up. Um, yeah, it was just I'm fairly decent at like reading people and some of their energy as well, just some of it. But like I could tell that she kind of worked with a lot more maybe like kids, like younger people. And so like I think there was a little defense mechanism there for me, because I was like, can she help me? Like, you know, I know the whole, you know, heal your inner child thing, but I ain't no baby. You know what I mean? So like there's some like defense there for sure. Or like, does she really get it? Does she really understand, or will she really understand, or be able to kind of pull some of those things out of me? So I definitely think I was guarded and defensive a little bit. Maybe not like outwardly, but I knew internally that I was like, I don't know.
I'm glad you said that because I think that's not talked about enough is that one thing you might experience in therapy is not being able to trust your therapist or wondering are they going to actually be able to help you, and that in itself can block you from being open because it's like I don't want to give all my, which makes sense, I don't want to give all my gems and all my emotional goodies to somebody if they aren't going to be able to help me because I have
Right.
to choose.
Genuine connectedness is so important to me.
Yeah.
Like when I think about my friendships, when I think about relationships, romantic relationships, platonic relationships,
Mhm.
like a genuine connection with someone is so vital. Like I'm not the type of person who can kind of make friends with all, you know, with a breadth of people. I'm more of a I have a small circle of people I have deep relationships with, right? And so, you know, interacting with her, I was kind of wanting and seeking if there was that type of connection that we could have. Not that we the homies necessarily, but someone who I felt naturally connected to and comfortable with, because I knew that if that was there, like yes, like her being a Black woman was definitely like baseline necessary for me.
Right.
and important for me. But then that next level to kind of kick it up a notch was like, do I vibe and connect with this person in a way where I know, based off of lived experience, that when I have that, I really am an open book. We can talk about things. I've allowed them to push me in certain directions, or to, basically see some of those, like, expose some of the wounds and not feel, super vulnerable or embarrassed or whatever about it. And so I think I was really hoping that that would be the case.
Right.
Um, and I know that you think about, sometimes it takes a while to find a match, or sometimes you have to go through a couple people to find a match. And but I think that's kind of where I'm at now, is like, I really want to find that connection, like that added connection, I should say, of someone I feel that pull with.
Right. I absolutely get it. I mean, you know me, I'll say how I went through four. Four to find the one I have now, which is solid. But I hear you just want a safe space. That clear, like, and that's exactly what therapy should be. And some people expect to find it their first therapist, and it sometimes can be a letdown. It's like, I come all this courage to try to do this, and this space isn't enough for me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's like, I talk a lot about, like, in regular everyday life, it's like there's like two conscious pieces of me. It's like, there's my brain, the logical, rational, can write it down on paper and like scientifically pull it apart. There's that piece of me, right? And then there's another piece that operates a little bit differently.
Right.
And like, there's a part of me that knows that's the case, that, you're probably gonna have to play a little musical chairs, to really find someone that you connect and vibe with, so that, like, you know 3, 5, or whatever years down the line, you're like, dang, I came a long way and you helped me, pull me here. Like, I think of those pieces. So I know that's the case when it comes to building. Similar to like a romantic relationship, you gotta kiss a couple frogs, apparently. That's what I've been told. You gotta kiss some frogs to find,
There's some warts every now and then.
so to find your person, I guess. And so I'm like, I know that, but that doesn't really mean that I want to do that.
Right.
Like, I know that that's the case. Like, I've only gone through one, and luckily I didn't walk away from the experience like, I am never doing that again. I definitely do it again. It's just more of a like, okay. It's like when you gotta figure out when you want to start dating again, like, because that's essentially what it is. I'm also gonna apologize because my COVID coworker, i.e., my dog Chauncey, he's going nuts outside of the store.
Wow, that's okay. That is okay. The more I hear you talk, I'm like, you would love, and I can give you more information outside of here too. You would love a therapist that does like IFS, internal family systems, because you already are naturally like talking about yourself with parts. And that's like what the whole therapy is about, is helping you understand like those protective parts that are like that shield that stop access from the wounds, that stop you from actually feeling that healing and all that you desire, and it shows up. And so I'm gonna send you the plug later, but to look for a therapist if you're interested in another one that does that approach, is gonna help you to work through that like in therapy as it's happening too.
I'm definitely interested.
Okay.
I think some of it is like my background too. Like, I was
Mhm.
drawn to like family dynamics and how they impact
Yes.
a person,
Oh yeah.
outside of, biology. Like, that's why I went into family studies. That's essentially what it is: development and family
Right.
dynamics, and like, how that shapes someone as they move through life. Not from necessarily like a counseling perspective, but just general, like, why do
Mhm.
people become the way they are, or whatever. And so I've always been interested in it, partially because it was interesting to me, me search. That's what one of my old faculty mentors would call is like me search, is that like, you tend to like gravitate towards like the topics and things that kind of like relate to you or help you to understand you in ways, even if you're not consciously making that decision. But
maybe that'll be the next book I refer to you. If you like to attach, you're gonna love this IFS, John. So thinking about therapy, because therapy it's so diverse as it relates to technique. Right? So thinking about that, was there anything that was different or that like surprised you with therapy? Like, I didn't expect that. That's a little different.
I think that what was surprising is that as prepared as I felt I was to have like vulnerable conversation, I had no real, I was so prepared that I didn't know how to bring it up.
Mm.
I was so prepared to talk about all the things that really bother me. And then when I would get there and she'd say, okay, like, how are you doing? You know, what do you want to talk about, or like what's going on or whatever. It would get to that point and I would like freeze. I would like, you know, keep it surface level almost. It's just like I could go down this rabbit hole of all the things I've talked about. I could talk about this past childhood trauma out of nowhere that, you know, happened 20 years ago or whatever. But that feels kind of heavy.
Yes.
That feels heavy for minute 2 of this here session.
Right.
And so like it was that, I think that's what was surprising. Not so much the method, but as much as it was more of like my internal process with it was surprising how hard it felt to allow myself to go there.
Right.
That was kind of shocking considering how much I'd played it in my head or whatever. Or there would be times this was also kind of frustrating, is that let's say all of my appointments were every other week on a Thursday. I don't know. And something would happen outside of that session, or outside of that time, and not close enough where the impact was the same. Because, you know, pain points is like the instant you feel it the worst, right, you know, right there. And then as time kind of goes on, I'm able to kind of like detach from that. It doesn't feel as bad. It doesn't hurt as much. And it becomes easy to like not talk about it anymore or whatever. But in that moment, I think about it and I'd be like, it's probably this and this, and I could tie it to this, and I should bring it up here. And then we finally get to my time to shine, and where I'm talking to her, and I just, I don't, I'm the person who got a whole bunch to say back here, and then show up and it's cricket.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was what was most shocking, is that I felt so ready to dive in and had no idea how to do it.
Right. I'm so happy you said that. That is it's that visceral experience of like your body just not allowing you to get to that point to actually experience it, because it becomes real once you talk about it in that session with somebody else, especially knowing what they're going to ask you. Yeah. But I say, even as a therapist, I have a very similar experience too, because what surprised me the most is even I would come in there and I'd still be able to talk, but for me, it was like, I didn't realize how big my emotions actually were. And my therapist,
like talk about it.
Yeah.
Regular, but
feel that drug? Oh gosh. Be like, what do you mean? Why you ask me how I feel right now? I'm telling you, I feel upset. Why you keep asking me? And it wasn't until then, like I think the biggest reaction once I just cried like a little kid. And that was the one thing I think surprised me, is when he really tapped into why I feel the way I feel about stuff. And I just bawled like I feel like I was no longer an adult. That was the junk I think that surprised me the most, that I actually got to feel emotions like a child as an adult. And
what was that?
I can't even lie. Like, I would prefer not to do that ever again. even as a therapist that does that and makes my clients do that junk. It is a heavy, and it's like, it's draining, but afterwards though, like I have felt release. But it's crazy that it took all that to like feel like heaviness and like to actually genuinely feel like shame instead of running away from it was wild. So I think that even surprised me. I didn't even know I had that in me.
Yeah, I think that happened one time where the mere mention or like she asked me if I wanted to like go there, like talk about, you know, a certain topic, like a certain person. And like I was like, oh yeah, sure, like we can do it, cool. She had me do an activity weeks and weeks prior to, and stuff kept kind of getting in the way of us kind of debriefing that activity. So I got to kind of push it off essentially. So I'm not gonna bring it up, girl. Like, you don't want this homework, you don't have to get this homework. And then it kind of came back around to kind of like talk about it at some point. And you know, as an aware person, I knew it was coming. Like my shoulders got tense, I like it felt like there was water in my ears. My heart is beating super fast. My words aren't coming out the way I need them to. I'm getting choked up. I start, you know, tearing up, and
You doing an extra blink, eyebrow scratch.
you know, like I didn't allow myself to fully unleash emotionally, but I definitely knew it was there. I was like, ooh, ooh, that it still has a hold on you. It was like one of those moments where I recognized that, where it's just like, okay, at some point you're really gonna have to like come face to face with, you know. And I think that's the hard part, I guess, too. I don't know for most people or not, but for me, it's hard to face those big emotions that you felt when you were young. Mm-hmm. And then like acknowledging how much of an impact they had, even though you're a grown adult.
Right.
Because like as a 20 something, you know, I'm crying about something someone did that wasn't necessarily, to me, wasn't a huge deal. It wasn't a huge deal. Like if I'm reading a story about something that happened now to a 11-year-old and her sibling or whatever, reading it, oh, it's not a big deal, like it is what it is. But 11-year-old me is hurt.
Right. Yeah.
11-year-old me is heartbroken and probably never got to express and feel that hurt and like let that person have it, like stick up for myself. I think that's what was hard, is that feeling the things, or allowing myself to feel the things that really impacted me early on, so many years later. Like that's tough.
Yeah. And I can imagine and I can imagine too, like that is something like to expect in therapy, is like why you have ran away from that feeling for all that time. Because if it's still scary to like adult you, or even like for me, adult me, you can imagine what it was like for a child.
Yeah. And so, yeah. Man.
Well, it seems like that part is
Chucky when you're 5.
Candyman.
Candyman.
Feel your feelings in the mirror. Right. But it seems like an expectation though is that part is gonna want to come out, because it had, if it's been shut down, quiet, not by maybe the world only, but by like us, like have been trying, like, hey, shut up, get over it kind of thing. Therapy is ready. It's like, give me the mic. And you as an adult might have to fight that, to say, hey, no, like, I want you to talk, but I'm not ready for you to talk, and like to go back and forth with that part.
Definitely, I definitely know little me is like tired of being sad. Yeah, like still sad, but you know when that shift changes from sad to like upset or angry and like or resentment, right? I definitely know that there's like a shift there. When it comes to like people dynamics, especially those people who were kind of a part of the original equation. Right. I noticed that. I've seen that, and like also confronting that not that you can't, but the likelihood of me doing it very well, like healing myself. And by healing myself, I mean like thinking that I can just figure it all out up here without having to involve external parties or even the person potentially that may have started the pain point. That part is also difficult because I can think myself through anything. Okay. I don't got no credentials, but I promise you, there's part of me that thinks I could therapize myself and
Right.
like just eliminate the steps needed for a process altogether. There's
Right.
definitely a part of me that believes that, if I had to be 100% honest.
Right.
But once again, that other part of me knows that it would probably be helpful and beneficial to my actual healing process, to be able to kind of talk it through, allow the emotions to do what they gonna do to get me to the other side. And some of it concerning, in order to get to the healing, I gotta go through the thing, which might involve me confronting the monster,
Yes.
whatever it or whoever it
The
is.
11-year-old that might be pissed off. It's been boxed up.
Right.
Yeah. And part of, I'm so happy you said actual healing, right? Because actual healing and what to expect in therapy is to see that one, you can actually handle whatever it is you're afraid will happen. That's the beauty in therapy, is you don't have to do that junk alone. You're no longer crying in your room or in the corner and hoping no one hears you. You're actually doing it in front of a safe person.
I'm on the gate. I'm looking at the promised land.
Look, you clenched it
I'm
down.
doing over there.
Look, you know me, I'm a preacher. It's possible. It's possible, but it takes that knowing, like, all it takes is that one breakdown to show that, oh, I can get through this. This breakdown is more of a breakthrough. I just got to feel this junk.
Yeah. Yeah.
You might have to feel it a bunch of times, but it's a weight. I know. So thinking, because I know 100%, even in my own personal experience, like my clients, this is something that happens. So everything you're saying, it is a common experience going into therapy that people don't talk about. A lot of times people just call them like resistant to therapy. And I'm here to say, like, everything you just described is not resistance, it's self-protection. It's scary to go into therapy and especially to be vulnerable with a stranger. I don't care how many credentials we got behind our name. I don't care how smiley giggly we are. We're a stranger, and it makes sense for people to be guarded. So knowing that that guarded piece though might make it harder to access full healing, what is something that you might say to someone that's interested in therapy for maybe the first time, or they're like contemplating but they're a little nervous, or maybe they've had like a couple sessions and they just are noticing the things you noticed about yourself?
I definitely say there's a couple pieces. So assuming that this person isn't necessarily coming to the forefront with a crisis necessarily, because unfortunately I can't relate to having a crisis. I would imagine like whoever you are meeting with, priority number one is like, how do we coach you out of this crisis? Essentially, let's get to that point first, and then from there, hopefully getting folks to um, a stable area to be able to continue to develop and work, and hopefully with that person, or it works. But I think for someone who just wants to try and like they feel like they're ready to, I definitely think one piece of advice is one and done is probably not realistic, and to trust your intuition enough to know that, one, that's okay, um, and two, just because someone has credentials doesn't mean they have the credentials for you specifically, if that makes sense.
Right.
Two people with the exact same education can have very different approaches in how they handle a person, and so or how they build connections, and start off on the right foot. So if it doesn't feel right, it's okay that it doesn't feel right, but it's not. Don't wear it as like a personal L. It's just you got to kiss a couple frogs, and that's okay. So I definitely think that is something to kind of keep in mind, but also um I think every situation, as you kiss the frogs, like as you continue to work through, there's going to be nuggets, golden nuggets of information, whether about the therapy process, about yourself, um, or tidbits of information just from the experience in general that would be helpful moving forward. And so I think you may not be able to necessarily say that you've been healed through all things to move on, and you know, you put on your superhero cape and you're ready to take on the world. I don't think that that's realistic, necessarily. And even if you do have the greatest therapist in the world, that's probably not what's going to happen necessarily. But even in those experiences where you're like, that person doesn't feel like a right fit for me, there are definitely um, pieces of wisdom that you can leave that situation with, whether you know it's trusting yourself, allowing yourself to trust yourself to get out of that relationship so you can't, or that therapist relationship, to move on to the next one. Or if you're speaking up for yourself, like, why are you asking me these questions if you're not comfortable with something? Like, know that there's power in that, and there is healing in some of that, even if the relationship you're trying to build with that person isn't necessarily the one for you. There is some pieces of like healing in that, with yourself, I think. And that's not to be taken lightly or to feel like a failed experience, with therapy in general, because now you know what you're looking for, or you have a better idea of what to expect, what you're looking for, and how you want that relationship with your therapist to look and feel.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And curtsy.
Yes. Yes. One thing I'll add is to know that therapy, you can't talk yourself through it. Right. If you heard anything we both talked about, is even when you try internally, you know what's up. Right. So even if the therapy doesn't catch it, you're gonna feel exactly what you need. And to hopefully, like Chrissy said, you keep trying to find that person that can help you through it. Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate you being vulnerable out here. We do this all the time, so thank you. And you know, I have to call you back because you hit on a whole bunch of other episodes coming up in the future.
Of course. You know, unravel. I got it's stuff up here. Let it come out. It can come out.
Bet.